This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Hey guys, I'm Si. Welcome to A.C.E Podcast Nation, the home of the Danny Batten Fight Show, powered by Violent Money. And of course, you can check out Violent Money on YouTube, Violent Money TV. Got some absolute cracking interviews on there, including some of my own with Mighty Mouse and Gary Tunin, Thornley. A couple of those dropped, which I did. And they've got some great ones with Dan Hardy and a few others as well, of course. So check them out. And if you go to violentmoney.co.uk, you can use the code ACE20 and get 20% off. We'll have more information on the Violent Money Academy coming soon. But in the meantime, check out the Violent Money Academy social media, as well as all their other social media platforms. Please do give them a follow. Tell them we sent you. And of course, they have the first smart MMA gym in the UK. But we're going to kick off the show as usual with an exclusive chat with another top name from the world of combat sports. We'll have our boxing pundit Ben Doughty joins us later on to talk last night's boxing, and we'll be discussing Cage Warriors 135 and 136, among other things. We'll also have a look at UFC 273, I think it is. Next week, which is obviously going to be a good one. We're live on YouTube and Facebook at the moment still, so check it out, spread the word, share the link, all that, all the usual stuff. And if you prefer your podcast in audio form, then the show will be uploaded pretty much straight after onto the Danny Batten Fight Show stream, which is available through the Sports Social Podcast Network, and of course, all the usual places: Spotify, Apple, all of them, anyone you could think of, Google, Stitcher, all that good stuff. But let's get to the fun stuff. Now that we've got the housekeeping out of the way, I am, as always, delighted to be joined by former Cage Warriors champion, a UK MMA legend, Mr. Daniel Batten. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Si, and listeners. I'm all good. Trust me, right? If you could see me right now, I'm sat here with my slippers, pajama bottoms on. I'm wearing something nice and cozy, all my nighttime stuff, with a cap on back to front, so I look cool for the camera.
Yeah. Well, at least you can imagine. At least you got trousers on. That's the main thing. Is
they're not always.
That's not always the case. So it's vital that is the case. And as I mentioned, we're joined by another top guest from the world of combat sports, and he's a first timer as well, which is always good. I'm delighted to be joined by Bellator MMA's lightweight, head of his bout with Alfie Davis in a few weeks' time. It is Mr. Tim Wilde. How are you, mate?
Hello, I'm really good, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I've been looking forward to this.
Top man, mate. Really, it's been a good one, and just think it's going to be a very good chat, and very much looking forward to it. So what we kind of tend to do is we flit around a little bit. We'll have some questions. If they come in from the live chat, we'll talk about all sorts, really, and we'll talk about how you got into MMA and all that sort of stuff. But first and foremost, I think we should ask you about your last fight and your next fight, and kind of how you're feeling about both of those, and give us an insight into that side of it.
Yeah, perfect. Well, my last fight it's actually been a little bit longer than I wanted to. I wanted to be more active, but was in October the 1st, I think, against French fighter Yves Landu, and it was, you may or may not know, but it was my first fight back after having quite a serious knee injury. I tore my ACL and my MCL, and it put me out for 12 months. Well, a bit longer, but the surgery was following the surgery was 12 months. And funnily enough, I was just on the phone to my manager out in the States previous to this, and I was saying to him that, that fight, that was like the final tick of my rehabilitation. So you can imitate a fight in training and you can train to a high intensity, but you can't actually have a fight unless you have a fight, as silly as it sounds. And that was what like I said, the last test on my knee, and I did that October, and I believe that kind of held me back a little bit in that fight, but it also was a massive win and positive coming off the back of that to know that I was capable of fighting still. As I say, you can pressure test yourself in the gym, but it's never the same as a fight. I knew he was going to target it, and so now that final tick of the rehab is done. I was just saying, as I said to my manager, I haven't even thought about my knee once since then. Just getting stuck in my training, doing my strength and conditioning as normal, and this fight in 6 weeks' time against Alfie, I'm just super excited to get in there. I believe that it's going to be the best version of me with no restrictions, no mental barrier of is my knee going to be able to hold up. It's just going to be me at my best, and there's no mental.
Sorry, that's my
bit
thing.
Of a delay there.
Yeah, it's my thing. Sorry.
No worries. And when I fought Landu in October, that was the first time I represented my new gym and my new team, Renegade, which I have actually been training with for nearly over 2 years now, but on and off around my surgery. But I felt like that didn't give the full representation of how I've grown and developed since moving to Renegade. So I really feel like this fight will allow me to do that. So as I say, 6 weeks' time, just super excited to get in there with him and show everyone how I've grown these last few years.
Like, knee injuries are brutal, especially like those ACL and MCL tears and stuff like that. It's so difficult to come back from. And obviously it's the time out as well, particularly as a fighter, and like the time out of the gym, the recovery time, the rehab, all that sort of stuff. Like, how frustrating and difficult did you find that period where you were out, indefinitely, pretty much for like the best part of a year?
It was difficult, and I think there was positives and negatives to the fact that it was during COVID. So everybody else in the world was much more inactive than there would have been anyway due to COVID. So that was kind of a positive. I didn't fall too far behind, but one of the negatives was I was going to swear that I'm not sure if I can, but all the bloody gyms were shut. So I was doing my rehabilitation with my missus' DIY makeshift kind of weightlifting stuff in a freezing cold factory unit, and it was just what had to be done. But so the mental side of it, though, for anybody who's suffered bad injury and trying to get back to high level sport, that is by far the hardest. So I'm used to working hard. I'm used to pushing myself into deep waters and having to work really hard in training and in fights. But it was the mental, like you say, the kind of going from training, I don't know, 2 to 4 hours a day for 2 sessions a day to not being able to do anything at all for 6 weeks because my leg was locked in a brace. I could barely walk. So that was really hard. The first few months were hard, but as I was able to start lifting weights and bending into my knee and stretching, and by I think month 4, I was able to start boxing work again. So it all got better, but then first 2 to 3 months are very, very tough. You just have to dig deep, though. I mean, if you're an MMA fighter and you're not mentally tough, you're not going to be doing very well as an MMA fighter anyway.
Yeah. You got to be strong. You got to be strong mentally. I think for all aspects of it, it's something we talk about a lot. Danny, I've spoken to a few fighters recently, both with you on the Sunday and also in the studio, and Tim's just kind of touched on it a bit there. But a lot of fighters have been saying to me recently, like when they're injured, even if it's a serious injury, they want to work around it as quick as possible. So if it's a leg injury, they're quite quick to do sort of upper body stuff, boxing, whatever it may be. Like, was that common? Is that the same for you, Dan, when you were back in the day, or did you stay relatively injury free? Because no one.
Yeah, no. I went through my injuries, both my knees. I ended up injuring at different points in my career. So I really feel Tim's pain. Not just with the knee itself, but the whole process. It's really frustrating being restricted. But listen, you'll always hear people who are winners. People who are successful talk about still working hard and working through it and staying positive. It's the ones that won't quite make it that will use it as an excuse to sit on their laurels, get down and depressed about it, and don't push to get through it. Tim's talking like a successful MMA fighter, like an MMA fighter successful should. He's talking about finding ways around to stay fit and and trying to look at things in a positive light, about to finish off his rehabilitation in the fight. He went in there with doubt, still pulled off a win. I always knew there was something special about Tim Wilde back in, I'm just going to check the date of this because it was back a little while, 2016. I remember you fighting that Martin Delaney. He had a really good fight record, and I know that people in the gym would talk about you and stuff, because I know you've fought one of our guys, Jefferson George. So we sort of was watching your career thereafter, and that was kind of a fight that I thought, if you pull this one off like you did, and in the way you did, I knew that you was going to go on to bigger and better things than you have. You're now on to Bellator. But that's how I would see like a turning point where I thought, hey, look, people are going to have to start sitting up and looking at this kid. He means business. Is there any particular fight other than that one? Would you say that was a pinnacle fight where you was like, hey, I'm here to stay, to make an impression at the top tier of things? Or what fight stood out for you where you knew he was breaking through?
Well, first of all, thank you for that. That's kind words. And yeah, that was a pinnacle point in my career where, as you say, he'd come off of the back of I think the UFC tryouts, hadn't he? He was 11-0 or 11-1. He'd only lost one decision, and I kind of made a statement in previous interviews before the title fight on FCC. I was saying I'm going to stop him. I'm going to be the first one to stop him, and I just really believed in myself and just really dug deep in training and stayed positive. And he was more of a grinder, kind of put you up against the cage, put you down on your back and ground and pound, whereas I was the sharper striker. A funny little story, actually. I remember weighing in. I had a tough weight cut for that fight, and he was built, he was very shredded, looked like a Greek god. And well, I'm just a tall, skinny, fat, ginger kid, from Birmingham. And I remember his corner looking at me laughing and thinking, there's just no way this guy's going to beat this guy. And I just knew that I was going to beat him, and I knew I was going to stop him. That was a big fight for me. And I think, like you say, people started to realise that I was here and I was serious about it. There was on the opposite end of the spectrum, one fight that was where I kind of found out that I wasn't invincible was when I fought on Cage Warriors. I fought a kid named Alexander Jakobsen, and it was basically a title contender fight. There was big talks of me getting fish gold following that, and I think maybe I'd gone too much the other way, believing in myself a bit too much, and I honestly thought I was just going to put him away in the first or second round. And I'm not sure if you've watched the fight, but in a nutshell, I pretty much dominate the whole fight and land well over 50 strikes on the kid. The kid's bleeding and I'm too sharp for him, and I'm just get a bit complacent, and the first punch he lands, a big massive overhand right, knocks me out. And that was a big learning curve for me in my career as well, on the opposite end of the question that you asked. But those are two massive fights for me that stood out, that kind of was a change in my my growth and development through the sport and my career so far. So yeah,
interesting, isn't it? I find it really fascinating because, like, obviously, often people like fans or media or whatever, they will look at a fighter's career, or they'll be watching and they will think a particular fight is like a turning point or a learning curve or something, but it's not always, doesn't always match up with the fighters or the fighters' teams and what they think has come out, what they've got out of that particular fight. In terms of your start into combat sports and that side of things, Tim, how old were you when you first sort of went into combat sports?
I started martial arts, Shotokan karate. I started that when I was 8 years old.
Okay.
My kind of parents and some friends that lived on the street by me were going there, and my parents kind of pushed me to go towards that. I was always very sporty, but I'd never done any combat sports. But with the red hair and stuff, I got bullied at school, and they were like, "Oh, it should be good for you, learn some self-defense." And I remember going along with two of my friends, Andy and Stuart, and didn't really like it. Just went because they went and my parents said, and it took me a couple of years to get into it. They'd fell off at that point, and my parents were quite strict, and they really pushed me to keep going. And by around the age of 10, 11, I started to actually really enjoy the training. I'd always been about football and basketball, and then I just stuck at it, and I started competing with it because I was quite. I was, because I actually wanted to be there from the point of around, like say, 10, 11, started putting some effort in, and I started progressing quickly, started competing nationally, internationally, and kind of grew from there. And all through my adolescent years, I was like, I fought in the world championships. I got disqualified to the guy that went on to lose. It was being a semi-contact sport. I think he played the game a little bit, but hey ho, I won the European Championships. I was numerous times British champion, and I kind of started when I got to around 17, 18. I started filling out as an adult and kind of growing into my man body, if you like. And I felt like I wanted to try something more contact, so I went and tried boxing. Didn't really like that. Went and tried some Japanese jiu-jitsu. Didn't like that, and then found an MMA gym. This is all over a period of from like 17, 18 to about 21, and then I seen The Ultimate Fighter on the very first season, Boris Griffin, and I was like, oh, what's this? I again thinking I was invincible. I can do this. I could fight and be one of these UFC guys, and found a local MMA gym, and I just started doing MMA once a week in a community hall, like how everybody kind of started it. And and then I found UTC, which this was UTC staffs, so it was a little sister gym of the big UTC we all know from Birmingham. And I was their first member. I joined there. I think I was 22/23, and it just progressed from there. And it was a case of, I was an electrician. I had my own business, which I loved doing, and me and my dad, and we had a little company. And I was quite fortunate that I earned decent money and a nice car. And basically, my whole life in 10 years changed from working full time as an electrician, doing MMA as a hobby, to and having some money, to having no money, being a pro fighter, earning nothing, and working very little as an electrician, to then fortunately making it to Bellator and earning some more money again, and being able to now kind of live comfortably, but give the sport and the dedication and time and training that it needs. So I've dabbled in martial arts, to answer your question, since I was 8 years old, but my core martial art and my passion was, for a good 10, 12 years, was Shotokan karate. And you can probably see that in my style with the way I fight and stuff. So yeah, it's been a good journey so far, and still loving every minute of it.
Yeah, long way to go, mate. Long way to go still. Like, in terms of your journey, I think you're gonna hit your peak soon, and I think we'll see even more from you. Danny, for those of us who are not sure the difference, what's the difference between karate and Shotokan karate?
Well, there's lots of different forms of karate. It's not just Shotokan.
Right, yeah,
I mean, Shotokan was, I presume you did a lot of forms and patterns as well, didn't you?
Yeah, we used to do a lot of kata.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of kata. I used to do taekwondo, which again was kata based, but we was quite a big competitive gym, so we used to do a lot of sparring and stuff. I think the defining difference between the karate is you've got that real full contact style. Which is you see a lot of the karate guys go across over and do, fight K1 against the Thai boxers, don't you? But I always remember when we used to go Taekwondo, there used to be a karate club in the sports hall next to us. And then every now and then we would meet up and try to figure out a competitive format to do a training day together. And they was all very, very big on their ippon punches. I remember they used to drop their stance. I can't remember the style of karate it was now, but I know they would be not very nice to receive one of their body shots with their ippon punch. I don't know whether that's something that your style was big on, but I know that was something that used to catch us out with and sometimes plant us on our asses, hitting us in the body while we're trying to do our jumping spinny kicks.
It was a shot that's very much from Shotokan karate. That's it's a very low stance, kind of a straight right backhand power to the midsection that scores like an ippon, which is the highest score you can have in that form of karate. So I've kind of come from that style, so I totally get what you mean there.
Yeah, it's Koshinkai, isn't it? I think that's the one, isn't it? That they cross over quite well. We got that style in our club, and it looks pretty harsh.
Yeah, then you have the Wadaroo fighters. They were more up high, bouncy, and elusive. As style of Shotokan karate was very traditional. A lot of kata, a lot of low stances, always looking for that score to the body, like you say. It's given me a real great base for my MMA for sure. Yeah,
would you say, like, because obviously you have your hands up like you should in MMA. You don't have your hands completely dropped down like I know that style of karate would have. You're very aware. So would you say that you've not wanted to lose any of your karate style and skill set? Would you say you've just added to it? Because this is something that I always say for people who come with a background. I'd say all you have to do is just add to your skill set, maybe change your starting form, but don't lose what you've already got and just try to add to it. Would you say that's what you've done to make your successes the way you have in MMA with your striking?
Yeah, I think that's like, as regards to a coaching point of view, that's excellent, because you shouldn't, I don't believe, try and change someone. Like me coming in as a karate fighter, my MMA coach shouldn't try and make me fight like a wrestler or like a Thai boxer, or So I definitely agree with you there, totally. And I think that there was some things, like it's quite actually my style of karate was quite a low guard. I can't really show you here. It's quite a low guard. I had to learn to pull that up, and I get caught out now and again with it still now. It's kind of inbred into me, but I've had to really train myself to make sure I'm aware of covering myself. But one of the biggest things that I took from my style of karate was the rush in and the rush out. So the way my footwork and the way I can kind of lunge in and lunge out, cover distance quickly, and it's I know it's the actual. Funnily enough, my teammate's fighting him, Fabian Edwards, but Lyoto Machida comes from the same style, Shotokan karate. So Fabian's been beating me up every week, but in sparring. But it's a very much kind of we can cover distance quickly, and I've kept that massively because that obviously helps a lot with MMA, being able to do that, and the footwork, the angles that I use. So that would be, for me, what I would say is the biggest thing I've took away from karate. And then just added to my game. I've actually, since moving to Team Renegade, I bought on a new striking coach, which you'll know, Damien Trainer. He's stripped me right back. I say stripped me, not stripped anything away that I've got. He's brought me back down, and I'm drilling basics. I'm drilling just straight left hooks, straight low kicks, and I've really, really been enjoying it. Because as you've seen some of my fights, I've got the spinning kicks and the jumping stuff, but to get traditional and just use that, get that basic solid left hook, solid low kick again, I've really been enjoying it. So it's good to incorporate that back into my style. So.
I think sometimes everyone gets caught up with trying to perform like emphatic moves and that, but you've got to do it from good structure. I think it's good. I every now and then go back to my boxing coach and just say, look, can we go back over all the basics again? I'll probably do it once or twice a year, and I'll do a program of 4 or 5 one-to-one sessions and reprogram myself. I just find that, if you don't go back to those core basics and get stripped down with someone with a real critical eye, you kind of lose some kind of foundation. I think this is what I'd argue has happened a little bit with Conor McGregor. I feel like he's lost a little bit of his foundation. Maybe, I don't know, someone ain't stripping him back to those basics. I'd call it our MOT in your game. I think it's really, really good to go back to that. And it's holding that tight form because, look, anyone could throw out a punch. You know, someone could throw a windmill punch and knock you out. But at the end of the day, I think what really, really matters is the structure of your base, your balance, and your guard. I think if you're as invincible as you can be to what might come at you, you're always in it to therefore throw your shots forward, however technical or good or bad they are. You know, I think throwing out the strikes is sometimes the easy part. I think it's structuring your form, base, and balance that's the bit that gets overlooked by so many gyms and so many coaches. So yeah, it's really good to know that you're still, you know, happy to go back to your basics. So many people ain't happy to. It's a little bit like being a black belt in one system and then knowing you've got to start again as a white belt in another system. Sometimes people like, I don't fancy any of that. But I think it's great to stay with almost that beginner mind, as well as, of course, having to strategize for your level. You're up at world class. I understand things have to get quite micromanaged at your level, but it is always good policy to go back to some form of basics and take different perspectives from different coaches as well. I like asking and posing questions of different background of striking coaches and get their perspective on things. I just find it all absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, we've been really blessed at Renegade. We've been having a striking coach come and work with us now twice a week. Joby Clayton, boxing coach. He's stripping us all right back. He's very, very big on basics, and it's great. You know, we spend half of the session just making sure our feet are in the right place. We're balanced. We're loaded up to not only dish out a shot but take a shot. Because you're in a fight, you're going to get hit, so you don't want to be off balance, like you say.
Exactly.
Any you could train a monkey to throw a punch, but you have to put yourself in the right position and have your base solid to be able and then land it. You know, to so yeah. And as I say, we've got Joby on board and work with Damien. I brought another guy on, Nathan Epps, who comes from the K-Star kind of Thai boxing scene, along with Damien and stuff. So yeah, I love all that. Like I am that guy that will happily warm up and drill for an hour at a jab, like on a bagger. Like I'll do that. I'll do that. It's great to throw spinning up kicks and jumping scissor knees and, you know, all these fancy stuff. But basics are what works. How often do you see them finish fights? They're few and few between. It's basics that win fights.
I don't know. You did win with a nice heel kick.
Well,
in one of your fights in your early career, a really nice one.
Did you see that? Did you see that
on.
heel kick yesterday by what's his name on Cage Warriors?
Oh. Yeah. Landed picture.
Manny Akpan, wasn't it?
Akpan,
yes. I seen the highlight. I didn't watch the full fight yet, but yeah, it looked
the same. Yeah, I watched the highlight.
Unreal.
It was kind of midst of a scramble, wasn't it? So it was nice. Like, it was very unorthodox.
It was almost like he was off balance as he threw it as well. It was like he was toppling over. But that was it.
Yeah. Well, no, because it's such a big wheel kick, he has to counterbalance. So, because he was throwing it so wild, well, not wild, but, you know, throwing it so big. Yeah, it's impressive. Nice one to have on anyone's highlight reel, that one.
Yeah, 100%. So, Tim, just before we not focus, but like talk a bit more about your fighting side of your career. You mentioned that you were kind of into other sports when you were younger. I was wondering if you were like any good at any of them in terms of, like, you know, whether it was football, rugby, athletics. Were you like ever sort of any good where you were at a certain level?
I used to have a nickname as a kid. They used to call me Daley Thompson because I could put my hand to any sport and I was always all right at any sport. And I like to believe that whatever sport I'd have chosen, I'd have done good at, because this is what I like to believe. But, you know, only the powers above know that answer to that question. But I was always a good defender, footballer. You know, but never played semi-pro or anything, but kind of like Sunday league, played well, played basketball. I was always really good at basketball. I played for the district at basketball. And then with the main two, really, I dabbled in other sports. I did swim, and they asked me to swim for the county, but I never actually followed that through. But like as a kid at kind of 10 years old, I was 3 nights a week karate, 1 night and 1 Saturday morning swimming, 2 nights a week basketball and Sunday morning basketball, and then Sunday afternoon football. It was all too much. So around the age of about 12 or 13, I just decided to fully focus. I think I did keep playing football till I was older, but I just focused on martial arts. And luckily, I mean, if you'd have asked me at 16, do you think you'll be involved in martial arts at nearly 35 and it'll be your job? I'd have been no. At 16, I'd have had no idea what I was going to do probably. But even at 21, when I started MMA, would I have thought 10 years on I'd be earning a living from it and fighting? Probably not. So I'm in some ways, I used to get cheesed off at my dad for pushing me to go to martial arts, but I'm very grateful of it now because it's given me the life that I can live now. And it sounds cheesy, but I am very blessed, and I wake up every day very grateful to be able to do this as a living. Because for every kind of one person that does, there's probably 3 who try and don't, and that. So I know I've put the work in to kind of earn it, but I am very grateful of that, and I always remember that. So, but yeah, I was going off on a tangent there. Sorry, but as for other sports, yeah, I'm okay at other sports, but whether I'd have been a star in any other, probably not, to be honest.
Daley Thompson, what a nickname.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose the younger viewers won't even know who he is anymore.
Yeah. Well, I kind of didn't as a kid. It's only as I researched him because people would, like, my parents and some of my family would call it me. Because I'd go and play him at a game of tennis, never played tennis before, and whoop him. So, yeah, it's good.
It's not a bad little skill to have, though, is it? That you can just pick up, like, any kind of sport and be all right at it. Like,
yeah.
Especially when you're younger, it's a good thing to have, isn't it?
Yeah. It's it kind of, I think, like, I touched on a little bit earlier that I was bullied a bit. I was never anything severe, but I think that kind of always helped because, ginger this and ginger that. But I was always good at football, so they'd still want me to be on their team, or do you know what I mean? So because I was sporty, it helped. I was still seen as a little bit cool or whatever,
Did you used to get into like many fights and stuff in school and things like that because of that then, or?
Yeah, I think kind of at a young age, I had a few tussles for kind of 13 and 12, whatever. And then towards the end of school, I did have a couple of bad fights and into, the kind of early drinking years, 17, 18, 19. I mean, kids nowadays surprise me, they don't really go out boozing at that age. But back when I was 17, 16, it was all I wanted to do, man. Get my Ben Sherman shirt on and get out on the town with the lads. But yeah, so I'd had a few scraps then and I've never had a fight. Like since starting MMA at 21, 22, I've never had an altercation or a fight ever, and I hope I never have to. I want to get paid if I am. So, but something about training. Danny will be able to appreciate this. Something about training hard every day and fighting that. It's like, I don't know. I'm just calm. I'm just chilled. I'm not interested in fighting you, mate, and any trouble and stuff. So,
yeah, I often wonder if, particularly like young fighters who, when they're in between camps and stuff, so they go and have a few beers with their mates and stuff, whether people kind of, they want to make a name for himself and they want to try it on with the professional fighter, and it must get like tiring and just monotonous to constantly have these like people coming up, because I know a few people around here have had like little issues with it, and it's just like, just go and enjoy your night and don't. But it sounds as if you didn't really have too much bother like from that side of things.
No, like. Yeah. Sorry,
I was just going to say that I absolutely agree, though, that doing the training, or particularly for MMA anyway. I mean, I presume it was for MMA, maybe boxers. It calms the ego. I think it's because in your training environment, there's always someone that can beat you, isn't there? So you kind of just got to eat humble pie, and I don't know, it's just a calming influence on your ego, and I think it does help you conduct yourself well. And also, I think having that air of confidence but not arrogance. I think when you are training and you are a fit young man and you can handle yourself, there is a sense of confidence, and you carry yourself off better. And I think that's a great way of avoiding potential confrontation. Yeah, that's how I think it is. And, of course, it's whether you put yourself in environments where something could kick off. I think that's a lot to do with it as well. But I come from an era where, as soon as you're 18, that's it, you're off out. And I used to go, clubbing and pubbing on a Friday and Saturday night, every weekend. It's just one of those things that was done when you're young. But I think fighting in the street now is so different from, maybe you touched perhaps in your lifetime, it may have been like this as well. I remember I'm a bit older than you, being 48, but back along when I was ever getting into any altercations, everyone used to crowd around, just used to have a fair fight. This day and age, you just never know. There's a lot of revengeful things going on. You never know whether you're going to get acid in your face, you're going to get bladed up by one of their mates, and they come and get you in a gang. It's the street code has really changed and got a lot more dangerous, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's bad. I quite like. It was quite gentlemanly and like respectful. Back like I used to work when I was an electrician. We had an old boy work with us. He's rest in peace. He's dead now. But he would tell me that at school, if there was ever a fight, that you're right. We'll meet you over the park, and they'll have a fight. And then they'll be mates, and it's just that's it. I was like, kind of. I touched on it a bit when I was leaving school. There'd be like rival schools come down, gangs, and you'd hear of knives and that. But nowadays, it's even worse. I mean, you want your kid in martial arts to be able to just defend and look after himself. But how well's that going to do when there's 3 or 4 of them, and one of them's got a knife or acid, like you say? It's. I think the beautiful thing about martial arts and MMA and combat sports, it gives you an awareness, doesn't it? Like I say, a confidence. If I saw some shit going down in a local pub here, it's a bit rough where I live in Bloxwich, I would just be like, pick up, if I was with my mates or with the missus, like, come on, let's move on. And you're kind of aware of it and you move on. You just kind of avoid them things. But yeah, somebody who perhaps, I mean, I'm not saying other people aren't like that. They probably are. But I felt that, like, martial arts gave me that awareness and that confidence to be able to recognize that and to just not have to be dragged into it or drawn into it and just walk away. But from my experience, just quickly, like when I was an amateur fighter, when I lived in Cannock at the time, and that has a bit of a rep for fighting and stuff, I used to feel a bit like, early on as an amateur, oh, he's a cage fighter. You get a bit of eyes and a bit of argy-bargy, but nothing too serious. But actually, as I progressed and the scene that I was serious about it, and as I went pro and I was doing well, I got a bit more of a local following. The guys, the local drug dealers or the local hard knocks would come up to me and be like, oh, you're Timmy, you man. Oh, best of luck, man. You're doing really well with your MMA and really got respect for you and that. And it was quite the opposite. Rather than them wanting to test me or they were behind me, so that's from my personal experience, which I'm glad it was that way.
It makes sense.
I also think as you get older, you can kind of, when you're out and about, you can spot if things are getting a bit like in the place, the pub or the club or whatever. If, like, as you get older, you tend to notice if the atmosphere is getting a bit shirty and shady and whatever, so you can quite often kind of, like you're saying, you can move on and avoid it without having to wait for it to happen. But it's just, and it's one of them things, isn't it? Alcohol and egos. So Tim, like, in terms of your career now, what's your ambitions, your aims? Where's your focus going? Obviously into your next fight, but sort of, I don't want to say past that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, totally. I set goals all the time, and I have short-term, mid, and long-term goals. And ultimately, I want to be and believe I can be champion in the Bellator division. I look at the 2 guys that fought for the belt last, Peter Keeley and the Pitbull brother, Patricky Pitbull, and I don't see them as way out of my league by any means. I feel like I would match up with them perfectly now. So the goal is to become champion in the division. I want that gold strap, but short term, I know I need to win. I know Bellator thought highly of me when they kind of put me in with Brent Primus as my first fight, being the former champ. So, and I knew it was a tough ask, and I knew at the time, my manager knew at the time, and it was, but I'm a fighter. I'm going to fight whoever they put in front of me. I have proper management now who kind of perhaps may guide me a bit different now. But I'm waffling on here. But going back to your question, I short term beat Alfie, and I'm looking to fight again this year. I believe they want me on Dublin. That's kind of come through my manager. They want me on Dublin, so that'll be 2 in this year. This is my second contract with Bellator, so the money's better. So that's really going to help take financial pressure off me, to the point where now I can invest and actually get out and go and train at like AKA Thailand for 4 weeks. I can start adding more to my game. I already invest in myself. or get different coaches in. And
even better, come for free at BST at Northampton. How about that?
Do you know what, mate? While you say that, though, I was talking to Jordan when I seen him at Battle Arena the other week, and I forget the guy's name. Shorter fella, mixed race fella. He invited me down, and I said, like, I'd love to come down. I think is he a jiu-jitsu coach or one of them? I forget his name. Sorry,
I do the jiu-jitsu there. I don't know who that would be.
I think it's RVP something on Instagram.
Raymond.
Raymond, yes.
Sorry, yeah. My assistant coach. Yeah.
I didn't even know him. I didn't even know him, but I know.
Apologies, but whilst you say that, he invited me down, and I said, we're not fighting each other. We should work together and like look to grow and build. And so I will definitely take you up on that. But just able to invest more in myself. As I said, I'm 35 this year in June. I know I'm kind of hitting my peak now, and I'm going to just have a real run at it. I've got no financial pressure. I'm very settled in my home personal life. Touch wood, injuries, injuries are injuries. I train smart. I train for longevity in the sport. So it's just have a real good crack at it now and get me that strap.
I think one of your strengths, I think, to have a real shot at this title is the fact that you're a really hard guy to train for. I know because I trained someone for you. I think one of the difficulties is that anyone's going to have facing you is it's really hard to get anyone to emulate that closing the distance that you spoke about. You're so good. You're like a fencer. I remember reading about like top martial artists would study the way a fencer moves forward. They're one of the quickest at moving forward, and that's something I think you've got in your favor that's going to be really hard for anyone to make judgment on when they're in there facing you under pressure. I think this is your main skill set, and I think this is something that you could play off to get the win. When you mentioned that Brent Primus, amazing grappler, really amazing grappler. The thing is, you actually put him on his ass. I just think you got a little too excited and maybe you thought you hurt him more than you really did, and you jumped on him a little bit because it was your first time on that Bellator arena, right? And you want to make big impressions. I think maybe you got a little bit too excited in that moment, but you're putting people like that on his ass. I mean, he's no slouch at understanding range and distance, and you caught him out. I really think if you faced him second time around, it would be definitely going in your favour. I'm really excited to watch the remaining part of your career because I do think you've hit the cusp of your peak. And I think the next 3 years are going to be really telling on whether you're going to make it. And I would put money that I think you can.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate that.
Yeah, 100%. Tim, we're going to allow you to go now, mate. But look, really appreciate you joining us. That sort of 45 minutes or so has flown by. I got to be honest. If you'd like to come back and join us, obviously you're welcome back anytime. Perhaps you can come back after your fight, and we can have a chat about that and stuff. That'll be real good. But yeah, definitely keep in touch, mate. And we'll see you very soon. Best of luck with your fight.
Thank you very much, and I'll happily come back and talk about hopefully another spinning up kick on Alfie Davis.
Yeah.
All right, mate, and I'll hopefully see you soon as well, Danny.
Absolutely, you're always welcome. Tim.
All right, mate. Thank you,
buddy. Good luck.
Take care,
Cheers,
mate.
Tim. Thanks, Brent. Tim Wilde, good guest. That was real. That 45 minutes flew by, and straight away, as is tradition, we're joined by a resident boxing pundit, author, and of course, boxing trainer, Mr. Ben Doughty. How are you, my friend?
I'm good as usual, guys. Hope you're well.
Yeah, mate, it's all good. So, an interesting evening of boxing yesterday night. Obviously, the kind of main fight, which I was following personally, was the Chris Jenkins versus Florian Marku fight. I was looking forward to it, and I thought Florian Marku did pretty well. I thought Chris Jenkins looked all right until he got finished. But I'm more interested in what you thought of the kind of fight overall, and then obviously some of the other fights as well.
Yeah, I got quite enthused about Chris Jenkins' approach to the fight. The first 2 rounds, I thought he did very well. He obviously had a very solid game plan and was looking to use his physical advantages and his skills, his reach, etc. And I must admit, Marku. So obviously, some people like him. He's big box office. He's got a big ethnic following. They call him the King of Albania. But I think he rubs a lot of boxing people that I know, just the rank and file, up the wrong way. You find him a bit obnoxious, or maybe a bit of a gatecrasher coming from a different, combat sports background, which we sometimes have that kind of snobbishness in boxing that he's not, he's only been boxing for 3 years, etc. And from the early days of Marku's rise, I heard a few ugly stories about his supporters and their behaviour and conduct in certain venues like the York Hall at Bethnal Green. So I probably formed a minor kind of... I've got nothing against him, to be honest with you. And actually a good friend of mine called Shane Watson is involved very much in his managerial team. But I was up for somebody beating Marku, let's put it that way. And I think a lot of people were. A lot of people I talked to day in, day out about boxing, they were like, I fancy Jenkins for the upset. They were talking him up. We spoke about it as well, Simon. And the odds look pretty generous. The odds look pretty generous on Jenkins from out of his stamp and experience. So I was really after the first 2 rounds, I could see him boxing Marku's head off and really bursting a bubble and all of that kind of thing. And then I actually posted on Facebook, "Come on, Jenkins!" And then suddenly, literally, no sooner had I pressed send than he gets nailed with that right hand, which turned his legs to spaghetti. First watch. To be honest with you, streaming on the phone on this occasion with the kids over at night and my autistic 14-year-old running about, I thought the stoppage looked a tad premature. I saw one replay and I didn't think that at all. I think it was a good stoppage. He was all at sea. He was in trouble. It was a fair stoppage. And my friend Shane Watson, who is all part of Team Marku, and he's obviously all gung-ho about that fact. Yes,
Shane, yeah.
He saw my status this morning saying, "Come on, Jenkins," and he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "I thought we were friends, mate," but only joking. But but obviously I put a curse on Chris Jenkins by actually, giving him that kind of excitation anyway. But you know what? It is what it is. I think Marku proved the point that he can punch, and that
yes, he did.
It was only 2 rounds in which Jenkins looked good. When all said and done, there was a long way to go. And he's a strong guy, isn't he? And he's marketable. I think he trains hard, looks very dedicated. I still think some half decent, welterweight beater. I think Conor Benn would beat him. I think Chris Congo, who wants to fight him, although it looks like Marku's not interested at this stage, would have a good chance of beating him, perhaps. Amir Khan, he mentioned a shot Amir Khan, didn't he? For one reason, he knows there's still big money in an Amir Khan fight from his end, But, what can you say? I think with Chris Jenkins, I saw a tweet from him today saying it's not over. I just got a bit greedy. Danny probably understands this term as well, greedy. When we say he got a bit greedy, we mean you pushed your advantage a little too much. Classic example, Billy Conn versus Joe Louis in the first fight back in the 40s, back in 1942. When he had the fight won and he decided to go for broke in the 13th round when he didn't particularly need to. And Jenkins feels he got a bit greedy because he was finding it. He was getting very confident in those first 2 rounds. Yeah. He won the first 2 rounds. He says he's not going to retire. I suspect his high watermark has probably been achieved, unfortunately, but I don't want to put limits on him.
It was is an interesting one because there was a little bit of there was a bit of needle there, and I think Chris's camp might have felt a little bit. There was a few disrespectful posts on social media and stuff like that, and maybe I don't know whether when he started well, whether he kind of because of the needle that was there, he almost kind of like chased it a little bit because he wanted that finish and the knockout to make a point. I haven't spoken to Chris today, so I don't know if that is the case. I was the same as you when it was stopped. I was like, that's way too early. He can take a hit. He'll be, and then saw it again, and I think it was a pretty good stoppage. And at the end of the day, when fighters' legs go like that from shots to the temple and things like that, it is what it is. At the end of the day, I think you got to look after the fighters' long-term health just as much as their short-term health. And his legs, had gone spaghetti. In terms of Marku, he showed he could finish people. Like, Chris. Not many people have finished Chris Jenkins.
No,
I think that's certainly a feather in his cap. The Amir Khan one, when he called him out a little bit, did make me chuckle, because I was like, I've got even less interest in that than I had in Khan versus Kell Brook.
Yeah,
but I could see the logic of Florian Marku, the where he is in his career. Amir Khan's almost like the perfect opponent for him, because it's a big name to beat someone of that ilk, and he's had such a successful career, albeit it seems like a while ago now, but it's still he's got Amir Khan is still an Olympian. He's had all these titles, and
there's still some kudos there.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, I mean, I'd rather see Khan retire personally.
Yes.
But...
well, we discussed it when after the Kell Brook fight, wasn't it? We all sort of said
I'd like to see Brook retire as well. I said I'd like to see Brook retire. Never mind Khan, but certainly Khan. But who knows? You know what it is? It's I don't know if I've said this before to you gentlemen, but Baron McGuigan came up with a very good maxim one time. He said, "They say the fighter is the last one to know when it's not there anymore." He said, "Nonsense." He said, "You're the first one to know. You're just the last one to accept it." And that is it. He said, "Of course you know." He said, "How can you not know? You're inspiring, getting hit with shots that didn't used to touch you. Getting worked over by guys, practically palookas compared to your former kind of level." He said, "How could you possibly not know that?" He said, what you choose to do is deny it."
Interesting. Was there been any further news on Kell Brook potentially fighting again?
Not a lot, it's been quite quiet, really. I mean, I know he spoke about, they were talking about, Chris Eubank Jr. has been talking back and forth, saying, what did Brooks say? I think Brooks said, unless you can make 154 pounds, forget it. I think he said that, right? I think he said it's got to be like middleweight. And Eubank Jr. was trying to say he could do 157, maybe, But to me, that's all blind alley stuff. In terms of what I'd be interested in seeing, I think it'd be great to see Kell Brook leave on a high. I mean, I don't know what his financial circumstances are, and obviously that's going to make a big difference to the decision he might make. But no, because Conor Bennett's been quite quiet. I mean, Conor Bennett's fighting Chris Van Heerden, the South African fighter, isn't he? Next time out, I forget the date, but that's imminent, coming up soon in the schedule. And then I guess they would look at that afterwards. But Brook's been quite quiet, to be honest with you, in the last several weeks.
Obviously Savannah Marshall, fought for the WBO middleweight champion, isn't she?
Yeah.
She won, and Clarissa Shields was there again.
Yeah.
Always got lots to say. What did you think of Savannah Marshall's performance, and obviously the potential bout with Clarissa Shields?
I think Marshall evidently is that rarity of a female fighter who can turn the lights out with one shot. She has that one punch knockout power, which is mostly absent in the women's game at top level. If you look at a lot of female fights amongst the girls at the highest level and for their world title versions, they tend to go the distance, and a lot of the time they tend to throw. A friend of mine made the point. He said, "You don't often see a female fighter who's noted for a murderous left hook or for a devastating right hand or a great body puncher. They just throw hands and get involved. They're usually gamers bagels, and can take a shot. A lot of these ladies at that level that I've seen, but they don't tend to be devastating punches. That does seem to be a trend in the women's game up to now. But Marshall can hit you with one shot and take you out if you're not if you expose yourself to her power. I think the problem with assessing her, to be honest with you, like whenever you see a woman who looks special in the context of professional boxing, they're usually plagued by the fact that there are not a lot of, they don't have the dance partners sufficiently, and the depth of talent in their division or in the women's game generally, either side of their division perhaps, in order to really allow them to excel and to shine in great fights. You get, your Katie Taylors. I know she's fighting Amanda Serrano soon. You get like a Clarissa Shields, for instance. And in the past, you had a girl like Lucia Reich or even Christy Martin, and they tended to be short of great defining opponents. What we're seeing now, which is an interesting situation, is I've never seen so many boxing fans, who are mostly men, let's face it, salivating over a female fight as much as this. To me, I mean, I know that Katie Taylor versus Serrano is a big fight and it's making history because it's the first female fight to headline at Madison Square Garden. But I hear more people buzzing, certainly in this country, about the possibility of Shields versus Marshall, especially after the last couple of times when Shields boxed over here and they had the handbags at ringside, and they built on that last night after Savannah Marshall's win. And I think a lot to me, it's almost got to a point of equality when it's not female boxing anymore per se, because there's a difference, between saying I'm fine with women boxing, and I think they should have every right to do it. And I think it's there's a difference between that and saying I really want to see these two women fight, and I've forgotten that they're women. All right, I've forgotten about specific genitalia or anything. I just want to see this fight. Yep, and that's what I think we've got with Shields and Marshall. Most people are both sides of the Atlantic, most people are talking up Marshall, saying that she's too good and hits too hard for Shields. I think a lot of people don't like Shields because she is bombastic, she's trash, and she's ghetto. I like her, by the way. I met her.
I know you. I was going to say you posted a photo earlier of you with her. So you're on Team Shields.
She was cool. I mean, I liked her. I felt like I got her. She's sassy, she's a sassy black, American woman, but she's cool. She's kind of sweet. So I'm nothing against Savannah Marshall, who seems very sweet too, and she can definitely punch. She's a good fighter. I like Peter Fury, her trainer as well, but I'll be rooting for Shields in that one. And but most people are talking at Marshall, saying that she's too good, she hits too hard, and some people are saying I can't wait to see Shields get knocked out because of the way she courts that kind of. If you do that bombastic thing, there's never going to be a world shortage of people who want to see you get put in your arse, So, but no, I do think it's. I think the thing is, some people are making it out to be the puncher versus the boxer, whereas other people are pointing out that Marshall can box too. But the difference is only one of them can punch, and that's Savannah. I don't know. I think Carissa's got hands full in that fight. I know you probably know they box as amateurs, and Marshall beat her for whatever it's worth in the amateur code, over 3 rounds. Sometimes those results got very little bearing when fighters meet the pros. I could give you a whole bunch of examples of guys who beat people in the amateurs and got battered by them when they met as pros, including Henry Tillman and Mike Tyson a couple of times. But no, do you know what? I think that it'd be interesting to see who the betting favourite is there, because I'm going to go with Shields to surprise a few people and outbox Marshall. I don't think she's a stopper. It will be interesting to see what happens if Marshall lands and see how Carissa takes her power, because I'm not trying to compare them to such all-time greats. So if you looked at Tommy Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard, for instance, right? When they fought, Hearns was the devastating hitman from the Motor City who knocked out all but 2 of his opponents in a run-up to that fight. And he was the puncher, right? And Leonard was the boxer. That's what everybody said. But boxing is not that simple all of the time. It can be more complex than that. And Reg Gutteridge nailed it. After a few rounds, when they were starting to settle down and get to know each other, Reg Gutteridge made the very salient point that it's clear now that Leonard absorbs the better punch. And that's what it came down to. Not who could hit harder, who was the better puncher. It came down to who could absorb the better punch, who could take the other guy's shots better. A bit like Nassim Hammond when he fought Kevin Kelly in that wild shootout in '97, and he said, I took his shots, could he take mine? And that's what it comes down to. Nas did take the shots and got up off the deck. So I want to see what happens when Marshall lands on Clarissa, and to see how she holds up to that power, because it does look to be another level of power compared to what you generally see in a women's game,
When do you think this fight is likely to happen?
They're talking it up, Simon, like it's next time out for both of them. They're both very focused on that. Clarissa seems very focused on it. Marshall said it's the only fight that matters to her. It's the only one she wants next. She said it in the ring last night. So unless there's any kind of curveballs thrown in after that fact, everybody, both parties seem very focused on putting that together. Clarissa says she's got no problem with coming to the UK. She doesn't want to go to Newcastle if she can, if you don't mind terribly, she said to the other people. She'd like to fight in London, for instance. She wants to fight somewhere neutral in the UK. She doesn't want to go to the North East to fight that girl.
It's fair, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. Ben, can I just ask? This might be a question you choose not to answer, and I give you the respect to say no to it, because it can be a really touchy subject. But one thing that I've been watching a lot of that's come about in the news that I watch is transgender men converting to women and now competing in sports. It's happened with Leah Thomas in swimming. There's an Australian transgender cyclist that's come on. They were competing in their respective sports as men and very, very average Joe. Then they're crossing over, taking the testosterone reduction requirements to qualify to compete in their sport. how would you feel about the fact that female boxing is becoming bigger and boxing is becoming bigger in the female sector? Therefore, there's going to be more money to be had. And sometimes I can't help but feel that sometimes this is an opportunity perhaps for the transgenders to move in and have I feel they have an advantage. I don't know whether that's something you agree on, want to comment on, but would you be willing to speak up if your opinion is against that, or do you think it's a fair playing field if they follow the requirements needed?
I mean, I tend to feel. I mean, I don't have strong views on. I'm a bit perplexed by the transgender thing, to be honest with you. Generally, not just in sports. I completely understand, and I've always been fine with gay people. Gay males, lesbian females, people who are bisexual and choose not to. To define their leanings one way or the other in terms of how they get the rocks off, whatever. Always, I mean, I've coming from a music sort of background in my 20s. I was always surrounded by that kind of more kind of bohemian element, and that which always brings its gay-friendly theatrical element. So I've always was never homophobic, nothing like that. To actually think that you're born the wrong gender and you're correcting some tragic omission by nature, that God got it wrong and you're a surgeon has helped you put it right. That does seem odd. One of the stranger examples which we saw in boxing was Kelly Maloney, who used to be Frank Maloney, Lennox Lewis's manager and promoter back in the day. That really was odd because I did know Frank very much as a figure, but on a personal level I had a couple of dealings with him when he was a man. But in terms of competing, and even with the thing the controversy in swimming that we saw recently, and there was a Mexican female fighter that has been accused of being a man. Ellie Scottney fought somebody recently that some people were trying to claim, and they've used certain previous photographs on Instagram, was previously a male. And no, I think that needs to be left well alone. I mean, regardless of how you identify yourself and what you choose to be and what surgical procedures you choose to undergo, I think if your birth certificate started out in one column, then that's where you've got to stay as far as something like professional boxing is concerned. Because obviously there is I mean, you're going to find women who are extraordinarily strong, who are stronger than certain men. You're always going to find that. I know, tougher than certain men and all the rest of it. But I think if you started out life as a male, then you should only be allowed to box with males. And I don't see why that should be controversial.
Yeah. Because I think it's not even about the surgery, is it? I think they can still compete even pre-surgery. It's about their hormone level, and I think that's what I'm sort of understanding.
It's different for different sports, I believe. Like the rules are obviously set by the certain bodies within each sport.
Yeah, I think in America now you don't.
The testosterone levels
defines it.
But, and isn't it in America now? You don't have to put whether you're male or female, but you put how you identify now. You don't even have to put, or you don't. It's just nuts. I saw
something recently when someone said there was a meme about motorcyclist who identifies as a cyclist wins Tour de France or something like that. You know what I mean? Which is kind of what it amounts to, isn't it? Sometimes.
I mean, I got to say, for me, when it comes to combat sports specifically, whether it's boxing or MMA, just as I've got no desire to see a male fight a female, I've not really got a desire to see transitions from male to female, because for me, look, I don't care what people want to do. I'm not interested in what other people are doing particularly. But just it's the same kind of reasoning where I wouldn't want to sit and watch a bloke beat the crap out of a woman in a cage or in a ring. It's just, I don't like it. I don't think it's needed. And look, but then I am also all about inclusivity. So like create transgender divisions and have other transgender fighters fight each other. Crack on. Great. Let's be as inclusive as we can be and have, professional fighters of male, female, and transgender. I'm okay with that, but I just think when it comes to combat sports, and
that's the thing, isn't it? So that's why
injury.
That's why I put the question out. While we're talking about boxing, because you're seeing this in cycling, which is harmless on a physical level. Obviously, it's disheartening for the females that are now having to fight it out over second and third instead of the gold. But But with the combat sports, or any combat sports, I include rugby and such to that. There's just, I mean, there's got to be kind of structure there for safety. Yeah. This is why you have male and female sports, but I'm hearing people, back up the decisions for transgenders to be included, but it's going to lead to injury. Surely it's going to lead to injuries.
I have seen that argument.
Lead to death, couldn't it?
Yeah. Exactly.
Just as an example, Fallon Fox, who fought in MMA, not in the UFC, but fought in MMA, who was formerly a very average male MMA fighter, and then fought as a female. She fractured, I think, I'm not sure if it was her last fight. She lost her last fight, but the fight before that, I believe it was, she fractured the skull of her opponent. And it was quite a brutal fight, quite a brutal victory. Now, I don't think it's controversial to say that that's not all right. I understand all fighters take risks. I do understand that. Do you take a risk when you fight anyone? But you've got to have things in place to protect people. And what do we say, Danny, all the time when we speak to coaches and speak to you, is sometimes you've got to protect fighters from themselves. There's a lot of fighters who will take that fight.
Yeah.
With, say, if you use Fallon Fox as an example, but with any person in the same situation, there's a lot of fighters who would take that fight because of all the reasons fighters, don't back down from fights. But sometimes you have to protect people from themselves. And I just think, look, it's got to be done in a way where you're not, you're not being horrible to people and you're not calling them names and all this sort of stuff. You see a lot on social media. I'm not about that at all, but I'm also, like I said, I don't want to see.
I think the challenge for right-thinking people, if you'll forgive that term, is not to be barracked for fear of being seen as transphobic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's why people
can be boxed into a corner by the woke brigade because you don't want to seem like a Neanderthal man. So instead you end up bending too far in an effort to accommodate someone, which is actually immoral in itself and illogical and everything else.
Well, this is what I think is happening in parts of America with the swimming in particular. You had a lot of the people who make those rules. They were afraid to say no, so they kept changing, the regulations and whatever to accommodate whoever, and because they're too afraid that if they say anything, so like if we were on a bigger platform now, we'd be barraged with being told that we were transphobic and this and that. And
if anybody cared what we thought about anything, this would probably draw quite.
Yeah, that's it. But nothing could be further from the truth, because I don't care enough that to like what other people do to be transphobic, but also like my whole thing of it is one is a health and safety thing, and then with women's sport overall, I think the potential damage that it can do with records being broken in, you already see it in America with like college athletics and things like that. You're having transgender females who've gone through puberty as males breaking the records by distances that will never be caught. So even if they change those the regulations or whatever you want to say, the rulings of testosterone,
they've still affected history,
because they'll never, I wouldn't say never, but it's unlikely that a biological female, if you like, will never reach that. Be able to break those records. And I think if you give it 10 years of accommodating this sort of thing into female sport, like female sports as a whole could be completely decimated, and it can never be turned back because those records.
Yeah, which could actually be the most unequalitarian thing, trend imaginable.
Absolutely,
true women.
Yeah, female sports have really struggled over the last number of decades, and really until now, to try to get on any kind of potential equal footing as men. And that just as we're getting to that cusp, it could be literally taken away by this sort of allowance. And I think it's criminal. I really do. But but you're right also, Ben, just to touch on further on what you're saying, that just to speak up as we are with our opinions on things and with reasons of our opinions. We're not just voicing an opinion just because we got our reasonings for it, but you could be targeted and attacked for it in quite an aggressive way. And it makes you shine away. That's why I just give you the grace that if you didn't want to answer it, I totally understand, because you're, very much in the public eye. I see through your Facebook, there's a lot of people make comments to anything that you put up on Facebook. And I know we're a little tighter on time, aren't we, Si? But there's another question I want to put to you is, you're really in a situation, particularly like from what I see from your Facebook, which is the main thing that I have to do with the media. Do you cause offence much? Because you're normally, with good reason, always with good reason, making your comments on any particular boxer and their career. Do you get people attack you a little bit in some of your comments? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Absolutely, I do. I mean, I've over the years, I've found that it's difficult, it's impossible to have any kind of journalistic integrity and any kind of voice in something as controversial as boxing without upsetting people and offending a few fragile egos in that industry. You get it when you're friendly with, someone who's friendly with a fighter. There might be a trainer. Sometimes you don't even know. Honest to God, you don't know who everybody's trainer is, and you'll say something about this Welsh lad looks a bit useless, and they'll be like, actually, well, he's actually my fighter, or he comes to our gym and he's a lovely lad. And do you realise that? Except so that's happened quite a lot over the years. To be honest with you, I famously-ish. There was a Scottish fighter once called Craig McEwen. I think his name was. I think that was his name, right? It's funny how I've gone slightly blank on that, which I'm not doing that deliberately to try and rub it in that he's not special. He was a good fighter, right? As a super featherweight, he was Commonwealth champion. Then he fell into retirement. Then as he was retired, he started doing a bit of unlicensed boxing. Somebody I know who's an interesting soul, creative soul, but a bit of a flake, a fellow called Rio. It's a long story. I'm not going to go into it all. But he invented in Canning Town, where we used to be based at the gym there, TKO gym. Johnny Eames was the governor of that place. He invented a commission called the Maltese Boxing Commission in the heart of East London in Canning Town, primarily because his girlfriend couldn't get a license to box for the British Boxing Board of Control. So he invented his own commission. He looked for someone that didn't have one, and he came up with Malta. So they started promoting stuff. And at one point, they started doing business with a German organisation as well. And they got hold of the WBU title, which was never very credible as a world title to begin with, although Ricky Hatton used to hold it in his genuine world title days, and he used to pack out the Emmy and Arena defending it. So anyway, long story short, several years in the whole process of this kind of Maltese Boxing Commission and the relationship with the German Commission, they might have sanctioned the show. They put a fight on it up in a leisure centre in Paisley. It was supposedly for the WBU light middleweight championship of the world, featuring this Craig guy. You know what? I don't think it is McEwen. I think I've gone blank on what his surname is. Muck something. Sorry, Craig Doherty. Sorry, not McEwen. His name is Craig Doherty, right? And he was a good fighter when he was a genuine, accredited, legitimate pro at super featherweight. Then years later in his dotage, when he's still a bit handy, he's fighting for the world light middleweight championship in a Paisley leisure centre against a guy who'd lost his last 6 fights in a row. Now, I just thought it was ridiculous. Now, the thing is, it was 2015, I believe. I was still drinking at the time. I was more of a boss and outspoken then. And so I just said, oh, yes, I'd like to congratulate, Craig Doherty on winning the light middleweight championship of the world. Floyd Mayweather, eat your heart out, or something like that. And then he got the hump because people, you get your screenshot glasses.
People
and I was getting all these
tag people, don't they? They tag people.
And at the time, I wasn't very mature about it. I said, look, tell the prick, I'll fight him in a leisure centre if he wants, or whatever. And then people said, and it went back and forth and back and forth. And but the thing is, so that happens, and that's happened a lot. And to be honest, I get aggro from Scottish people to this day over that, and he still hates me to this day, and I've tried to apologise for it. I've had a few things like that, to be honest with you. Yeah, the few things have gone on. The funniest thing over that was somebody said, I think you're being elitist. And I was like, listen, if you can't figure out that the concept of world championship boxing is elitist by definition, then you must struggle to tie your shoelaces each brand new morning, But to be honest with you, long way of entering, but it happens quite a lot, and I have to deal with it. I've got the longer I've been sober, the better able I've been at being diplomatic. But I never want to be so diplomatic that I lose the passion and the cutting edge. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you got to give honest answers, haven't you, and honest opinions. Otherwise, people see through that really quick. Like,
I think so. I think so, because you can see these second journalists on TV talk about the equality thing. We've got loads of pretty women on TV now, all holding microphones and saying, "So, you know, that the left hook. Then, did you feel it was it generally best thrown with the left hand or whatever? You know, so that part of that is market forces and female glamour is always sold, but maybe a part of that is also equality and
it is. I mean, it's happened. It's happened in football a lot.
Yeah,
there's a lot more female, but in fairness, I would say now it started off a bit rocky, but I would say probably 90% of the female presenters and people who you see on Sky, BBC, ITV who are doing football are very, very good. And there's a lot of good ones.
There's no reason why it shouldn't be
to get there.
Yeah. I think so, and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of useless male presenters on.
God, there's many more.
But I just think, in any case, I don't want to lose that passion, like you say, because I think you can see through it if somebody really cares or not. When they approach this thing, and for me, my biggest peeve has always been the disingenuous nature of world titles, the way they multiply like confetti in the era, and you get domestic level fighters, and there's a lot of pride in being a domestic level fighter, just as there was a lot of honor and pride in the old days in the real world of being a contender. That whole "I could have been a contender" that doesn't exist anymore. You don't hear that word much anymore because there's no contenders, because they're all champions. All of them are champions of some sort, and people think it's totally legitimate to say my boy's boxing for the interim world championship. What do you mean interim? The real world champ's not even injured. He fought last night, so what's the interim of what? I get the interim concept just about if he's sidelined or something like that, But we've lost the plot in boxing as far as that goes, and that the day that I don't get annoyed about that and a bit animated is the day that I've who knows, I'll be dead.
For me, I think interim titles, there should be like a set, like if the champion is out for say 12 months with an injury, then you create an interim title. If he can fight within 12 months, then don't bother. Just make
maybe call it a contender title. Maybe.
Yeah, just make it a number one contender fight.
They need to find a better way of marketing fights without saying it's got to be for a championship. They need to find a way of marketing these stories and these personalities and the things, the sum of their parts in the ring and what they bring to the table. They need to start marketing fights instead of fighters.
Sorry, Ben. I was going to ask you, what do you think is surely a number one contender bout is fine in terms of? I'd rather that than
like a final eliminator
interim title. Yeah,
they used to call it a final eliminator, which is what it is. But what the reason they do it, as well as the obsession with that kind of hardware and championship status now. Like Dylan White was the interim WBC heavyweight champion. I believe he still is. I'm guessing he has been for a while. I think he won it against Oscar Rivas, but then once again, it's hard to keep track because I don't really care enough about this side of it because I'm against the whole concept of it. It's difficult to be a statistical geek on it. But Dylan White, after he won that, he posted on his Instagram, WBC heavyweight champion, who's next? Which is just lies. It's just completely misleading and disingenuous. And I've already had you asking me, Danny. I've had previous with Dylan White as well because I did a live interview on Facebook with him. It went down badly. We got very bad temper with each other. And his trainer, Mark Tibbs, who is a friend of mine, who I think the world of, and I'm cold with now, he banned me from the gym for about 3 days because I'd upset Dylan. And he's like, stay away. You've been digging Dylan out, but because this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with these egos and their belief systems. But, the interim title was. The reason why they call it that, they say the winner of this is the final eliminator, and the winner of this will be our interim champion, is because you can charge sanctioning fees for that. You couldn't charge people a fee for becoming your number one contender, but if you give them a belt and a title, you can charge them a sanctioning fee, and then that's how you generate more revenue, and that's all the sanctioning bodies are interested in doing. And, I suppose if I could find ways to monetize by plucking things out the air based on the things I do, then I suppose I would do it, wouldn't I? But I do think we need to. Professional boxing is a business, but there has to be a way of respecting the integrity of that business or restoring the integrity to that business in a more agreeable way than we see today, where it's anything goes and everybody's a world champion and nobody even struggles with the notion anymore. I know we've gone a long time, but in closing, when Ernie Terrell was declared the WBA heavyweight champion because they didn't like Cassius Clay, shrunk Muhammad Ali in that same period because he made unpatriotic remarks and he was a renegade member of the Nation of Islam, they stripped him of the title for nothing, essentially, other than personal feelings and politics. They had Ernie Terrell and Eddie Machin fight for that title, and they called the winner the WBA champion. Now, nobody took it seriously then. Everybody laughed. Literally everybody laughed. Like they would in football. Like if you tried to say that, Chelsea are the World Cup winners, it's not whoever won the World Cup tournament last time. Unfortunately, in boxing, everybody's become desensitized to it and it's been beaten down. And there's no kind of public common sense and resistance to that anymore. So you can sell anything you like as a world title fight today.
Shocking. It is. And it's never ending. It's the same in MMA as well. Right, Ben, very quickly, in one word, next weekend we have, butcher these names now, Gennady Golovkin versus Ryota Murata, for the IBF, the IBO, the WBA middleweight titles. Yeah. Who will win?
I'll go with Golovkin. He's getting long in the tooth. But he's unless he gets old overnight, he still should be formidable enough to beat the Japanese guy. Admittedly, I have not seen a lot of the Japanese guy, but my feeling is for Golovkin, you could never be too surprised at an upset at this stage of his career, though.
No. And then the following week, we've got Conor Benn versus Chris Van Heerden. And Errol Spence fights as well that weekend. So there's a few fights coming up, so I'm sure we'll see you soon. Yeah, but Ben, as ever, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers, boys.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Cheers. Thank you.
And now Danny is going to give us a quick, very, very quick overview of, and you're going to have to alter your camera, overview of the Cage Warriors shows and anything which stood out, anyone who stood out.
Yeah, I was just disappointed for Jack Eglin, really.
Yeah.
That was a bit, not a shocker because, they're all young, tenacious.
Very, very highly rated fighters.
Yeah, but I feel bad for him.
Look, Ian Dean rarely gets it wrong. So I'm very begrudged to criticize him or Graham Boylan. But I didn't understand pitting those two against each other.
Yeah.
Because they're both really highly rated, both unbeaten. And I was just we could have seen this in 2 years' time. But
yeah. I mean, I haven't seen. I haven't
criticize them because they're so good.
A lot of these fights, I just saw like the clips of the end.
Just tell me
not able to. But and also Gerardo Fanny, that was a great performance. When getting with Adam Cullum getting TKO. Adam Cullum getting TKO. I mean, that was pretty impressive. It looks like someone I would like to keep my eye on. What other ones?
I thought Liam Gittins on.
That was a good win.
I thought he was really good, and I thought he showed a different string to his bow, as it were. Obviously, we've seen him go, balls to the wall and kind of, really go all out attack. But I actually, he went the distance, and I was impressed.
Someone who seems to have fallen from greater heights really and struggling is Dean Truman. He seems to be really struggling with his career at the minute. I don't know how to say the guy's name. Giuseppe
Rodriguez.
Someone else coming onto the scene. But Dean Truman just don't seem to fall more of himself. I don't know whether it's because the level has just moved on up or what the case is. Whether he's lost a bit of passion there, I don't know. But he was such a big name, and now I feel like he's struggling a little bit. So I don't know what that really is down to. I can't put my finger on it. I'd have to watch that fight in its entirety to make better and further judgment on him. But that's kind of disappointing for him. It would have been nice to see him get back on to better trajectory for himself. But you said about Gittins. One we had that.
There was another one who impressed me on the first night. Who was that? Matthew Bonner was pretty good. Yeah, he beat Pereira and Nicole Main with a rear naked choke. But The one who won
Did
by
you
front naked choke. I forgot his
Right,
name.
yeah. And did you see that Burlington? Did you
Yeah, that's the
watch
one I
that
was on
fight?
about.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I thought, wow. I
Beautiful.
mean, that was a great fight. That was really backwards and forth from
Yeah,
each
it
of
was a
them.
good,
They
really good
both
fight, wasn't it?
really had their moments. Yeah, if you want one which gets you on the edge, particularly if you're fans of both of them, it would have had you on the edge of your seat. And both of them had the opportunities to win before the win was finally, secured with that front naked choke. I think we called it a ninja choke. I think I've heard the term. There are numerous terms for
Yeah, I saw a few
submission
people
and
calling it
position.
different types of choke.
Yeah. But it was very nice. A little bit of exhaustion come into play. I think maybe it might have been the fact that I don't know how to say his name, Bariski, but Daniel may have burnt himself out trying to finish Burlington in the first round, and maybe hadn't quite recovered from that because he's quite thick set in the body. And I think maybe it took a little something out of himself. And when he was being the receiver of the pressure, it's like his cardio was just going out the window, and started leaving his neck hanging, and he got caught out. But really good fight to watch. I enjoyed that one. That was one that I did manage to watch the whole fight of. I think that pretty much sums up all the standout parts.
On the second night, Manny Akpan obviously had that incredible knockout. There was also another knockout. I think it was the next fight, or it might have been the one. No, it was the one before. Oh, where's it? He has got Alexei Mantekivi knocked out Jan Anderson Castro. I tell you what, mate, Alexei Mantekivi is one to watch. He looks special, really special. I thought Luke Riley looked really impressive against Jack Eglin, but I thought both of them looked pretty good. Is funny. Then you also had Gerardo Fanny versus Aaron Abbey. Mate, look, we all know Aaron's story, and they've used that to rightly publicize, like promote his fights and tell his story. We had him on the show, and we talked about his story. It's inspiring. It is inspiring,
absolutely,
to come through the adversity that he's come through. But what he did last night was he said, "Never mind my story. I'm a world-class fighter," because that performance was superb. It was so good, and I was really, really, really chuffed for him, because I think sometimes it almost gets the adversity in his story. It almost goes, when people are talking about him as a fighter, they almost talk about his story more than his skills. He's an incredibly skilled fighter, and I thought he showed that last night, and I was really pleased.
Yeah. I think he's got his story out there.
No mug, mate, is he?
No, absolutely not. I feel like he's got his story out there, and he's had his sympathies from it. But I think he don't want to be identified as just this story. I think he wants to now draw a line there and be recognised for what he's doing, and what he's doing very, very well, which is winning. And I think perhaps we should give him the props up and perhaps focus more on what he's doing now and what he's looking to potentially be doing for the future. The kid's moving on the way up, and I'm so happy for him.
100%, mate. And you know what else, mate, is I think that he's going to get a title shot in his next fight.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I
would not be surprised.
Like the next, because he's on I think 3-fight win streak now. So
but there's so many fighters as well that are on the prelims that I've never, some of them I've never heard of, but there's a couple of outstanding.
Remember the name Mantekivi?
Yeah.
But like Manny Akpan has been on a tear, knocking people out, still on the prelims.
But if you have a look on the prelims, there was loads of finishes.
Yes,
loads of finishes. You got some real talents. I think on those prelims, you're more likely to get. I don't want to say mismatches, but you're more likely to get differentiation in the levels, and so you will perhaps get these standout performances happening more so there. But sometimes I think they make better viewing for just general fans, because everyone likes to see a submission, everyone likes to see a knockout and a back and forth battle. They're still at that proving ground stage. I think sometimes when you get to really high level combatants, it could be all played out in footwork and positioning, and perhaps makes it less visual. But certainly for a coach's mindset, we find that really interesting. But the prelims, they're really worth a look. I think everyone goes to the main card, don't they? But the prelims have got some corking fights, and I really push for people to have a look and perhaps, like you're doing, pick out a name and start following their career, because I think on this weekend you would have seen some people that are going to start making some big headway in the next 2 to 3 years.
Oh, 100%, mate. There's something really special going on with the way they're doing things at the Cage Warriors. Like, the prelims are always good, so I always, I'm always sure to make sure I can watch them if I possibly can.
Yeah.
And they've got a Dublin show, Belfast show coming up. Sorry, and Reece McKee's going to be main event in that. That is going to be an electric atmosphere.
Yeah. And if Reece McKee puts on a hell of a performance, I can see him going back UFC bound.
Really interesting. We've got Ian Gary fighting next week, mate. So we did the because I got my dates mixed up, being honest. So we did our predictions for UFC 273 last weekend with Volkanovski and Korean Zombie and stuff. So we'll kind of obviously we'll see how we go. And next week we're being joined by Shore MMA's newest professional, Stephanie Evans. So really looking forward to speaking to Stephanie, because we all know just how good the coaching and the facilities and everything with Shore MMA is. And I've heard good things about her and her attitude, and the little contact I've had with her. She seems, really nice, and she seems keen to chat. So I'm looking forward to that, I've got to say.
Good stuff. Yep.
As always, Danny, a pleasure, my friend.
Yep.
Another two good guests, because Ben's always value. Guys, check out Violent Money, check out ExpressVPN. Everything's in the links, descriptions below. And please just spread the word, tell people. I see a lot of comments saying, most underrated fight show in the UK and best fight show in this and that. Like, tell people that. Don't just tell us. Tell the people. Spread the word. Help us out. Got some really good guests coming up over the next few weeks, if things pan out the way they are looking at the moment. So fingers crossed for us. See you soon. Take care. God bless.
And good night.
Good night. # don't be a dick.